Hi there, and welcome to From Mild to Wild and everything in between. My name is George Villaro. I'm going to be your host. We're going to teach you how to do drags, not drugs. I want to turn you into a dragster and not a drugster. But before we get going, I'd like you all to get that blank tape out. I want you to record all the programs. This is going to be a series of programs that are going to show up weekly on Time Warner Channel 10. Herkimer County Community College is doing the filming, and I'm giving the information. So on Mondays and Wednesdays at 2:30 and again at 7:30 at night, you'll be able to see this program, and I want you to tape it. You're going to get a lot of good information. Whether you use it today, tomorrow, or the next day, at least you'll have it recorded. Now let's get started. I want to start with the rotating assembly on these particular motors. That's the crank, the rods, and the pistons. I'm going to show you three versions of these particular assemblies because you can't always use one piece with the other piece. The determiner is how much horsepower you're going to make. Let me show you this first crankshaft here. This is what they call a cast crankshaft. This crankshaft initially started off as a truck crank. It was in the truck 4-bolt mains because it was a little better casting. You can distinguish that it's a cast iron crankshaft because of this little dimple on the front. Now, you also look down on the side over here, and it'll have a casting number. Last 4 digits would be 2442. That will tell you that this is a cast iron crankshaft. So either the number or the dimple. These crankshafts were put in and they'll last you because you're under 2,500 RPMs and under a 9-to-1 compression engine. They'll last you for 100,000 miles, no problem. But you'd want to always keep these under a 300 horsepower assembly just so you don't have any future trouble. This next crankshaft over here is what they call a high-performance crankshaft. This is made of steel. It's a 1053 steel. You can tell by the front. The front does not have the dimple. It's got a parting line on it. That's how you can tell the difference between the steel crankshaft and a cast iron crankshaft. Now the numbers on this crank are 1182. That same casting number you'll find on the second throw, and it's the 1182 casting number. Now this particular crankshaft, they originally intended it for the 370 horse LT1 engine, and it worked very well. They have no problems with them. Now, our particular assembly that goes on this crankshaft, we ran 458 cubic inch and never did have any problem. You can see she's still alive, she's still kicking. But if you're actually going to go over 400 horse, I want you to get into an aftermarket crankshaft. This is what they call a sportsman crankshaft. It's made of aircraft quality 4340 steel. Now you're picking up some number differences here. 1053, 4340. Now there's one more crankshaft which should be parked in this next spot, but it's in the car right now because we're still driving on the street. Weather still permits it. But the next crankshaft that is available is a E4340 certified chrome moly steel. It means that all the impurities have been taken out. It's pure steel. Now, what you're looking at here, this particular crankshaft would be safe to take it up to, say, 700 horse. So you can see you've got a big leeway between the steel to the aftermarket 4340 Sportsman crankshaft. Now, this particular crankshaft, I showed you the parting line on one and the dimple on the other one. It has a hole drilled right straight through it. It's what they call true holes. There's one all the way through on the up this crankshaft outside rotating edge. It makes them a lot easier to balance also. Now, when you get into a crankshaft like this, they've done a larger radii down here with the same bearings that you're running on the previous two crankshafts. This crankshaft calls for a special bearing. It's got the large. Now, speaking of bearings, we've had a little trouble for the low oil pressure as the we found just recently that these two bearings, there's two halves of the bearings, one on the top, one on the bottom. And where they're joined, the parting line, they call it, is the tolerances need to be tighter. I found a bearing company that has the tighter tolerances. Actually are so tight it's measured at .0. Will eliminate hot oil temperature when the pressure drops. So we've changed bearings, and we'll show you them when we get to the bearings. They've also gone here where the oiling system is. They've chamfered or deburred, whatever you want to call it. They've taken the rough edge off and they put a little pocket in there so there's no rough edges to grind against the bearing, and it actually makes a little pocket of oil also. Now this particular crank, it's been ground on the large side here to make it all even. These edges are not ground. This one's actually ground. The OD is ground to make it all more uniform. We have not done a knife edge on this particular crankshaft. On the other crankshaft where we're going to go more horsepower, we did. But on this particular crank, we didn't feel it was necessary. But we'll show you a knife edge. All these terms that I'm bringing to your attention, I want you to realize that there's not just one product out there. If you know that there's 3 or 4 different crankshafts or rods that are available, depending on your application, at least you'll be able to judge how much horsepower you're going to make and what crank rods and pistons to buy. This flywheel right here, this is a little safety item. This is a stock flywheel which you've all got in your vehicle today. I always go in and buy the little thicker one. It's about 30 to 35 thousandths thicker because these have a tendency to crack around where the converter bolts in. So what you want to do at this point, if you think that later on you're only talking a difference of $10, $15, later on you may want to go into some more horsepower. Now is the time to buy this flywheel. That's one less thing you'll have to worry about at a later date. Now I showed you the crankshafts. I'm going to take these crankshafts off the bench and we'll put the pistons and rods down and we'll continue the program. Now I want to show you these 3 different rod assemblies. They all look the same. Let me show you these 2 right here. Now what you've got is this rod assembly here is the stock rod. It matches that cast iron crankshaft. Now you can tell it's a stock rod because of the bolts. These have got actually a square bolt on them versus a hex bolt. Now, what you're looking at is these are actually pressed in. This is pressed into the fork of the rod bolt, and when you put this in here and you put the nut on, you torque it, it actually squeezes the bearing together and gives you the proper tolerance here. Now this particular rod is of a stock nature. There again, it's good for under 300 horsepower. When they started to go above 300 horse to that 370 LT1 engine, they went to what they called a pink rod. This is a pink rod. It's made of 1038 steel. You can see you're going to start getting number or a little more familiar with the numbers that they use, but this is a different steel that they've used. Now, these rods originally came through with a bolt like this, and we've replaced them with these wave locks. Let me grab this. Can you see how much shinier they are? This is what they call a wave lock bolt. It doesn't damage the inside as it's pressed in to the rod. These have been knurled. There's little high points on there which actually cut into the rod. We don't use these anymore. We go into a wave lock bolt right here. And that also has a different nut on it. You can see these nuts have actually got flat washers put right to them, where the stock nut has no flat surface on it. Gives you a better, more even torque right here. See them two? Now, going from this pink rod, you're going to go into an aftermarket rod. This is a 4340 steel rod also. This one here, what we've done is we've actually gone to a longer rod. The stock configuration actually measures from the center of this large hole to the center up here, 5 inches, 700 thousandths long. This rod here is actually 6 inches long. What it does is it gives you a better mid-range and top RPMs by making a longer rod, because it positions the piston better in the bore. Now, these pistons, these rods right here, do not have the same type of setup there. You saw a nut and bolt assembly on the other one. This one actually screws into the fork. These forks are threaded. So they actually screw in, and they've got a little collar which lines them up right here. So when you put these together, you go like this, you screw the bolt in. You can see that large flat space right here, which gives you a better clamping power right here. Now I want to talk to you about the bearings that go into these. I told you earlier that they do take a special bearing. Here's the two halves right here. These actually go together. One goes, they're marked, one on the top, one on the bottom. Now that chamfer that I referred to, you can see the shiny spot right here. These bearings have actually been cut away. They've been chamfered to match the crankshaft. That's why they took the sharp edge off of the crank and chamfered this edge. It makes the crankshaft stronger, and it gives you a better ride on the bearing. Now these particular bearings that we've switched over to, let me show you last year's. Now last year's bearings have only got about 21 runs on them. We had a little over 100 miles driving it on the street, and we ran 21 quarter-mile runs on these, and the oil pressure, as I indicated earlier, was dropping down to a 20. We normally have 60 pounds cold, 30 pounds hot at an idle, and what was happening here was it was dropping down to 20 pounds at an idle. It concerned me, so after quite a few phone calls, we found out what the problem was, and the problem is in where these two bearings go together. This little parting line, they call it. See right there? They've got to be a little bit tighter, so as the bearing gets hot and expands, it'll maintain the oil pressure. The oil pressure won't drop. And that's one of the more significant reasons why you have engine bearing failure today, because these bearings here are brought to within 0.001 tolerance. So that's why that'll maintain your oil pressure. Now let me move these over, and I want to show you the pistons. You can see there's that 300 horse, 400 horse, 500 to 600 horse. Now you also got to watch too, because when we start talking about pistons, this rod will work fine on 11.5 to 1 compression piston. But you can't put a 13.5 or 14 to 1 piston on it. You've got to use a different rod. The rods that we've got in the car now are a bow tie rod. They'll take a 14 or 15 to 1 compression ratio, where this rod will not. That's why each item that you're looking at, you have to understand that there's a difference between them. Even though they look the same and go in the same position in the motor, they all don't work with each other. I'm going to turn these. We talked about breaking pistons. Now here's a good example of a broken piston. This one here, see how this has got a tab? It's broke off right here. See how that's gone? That was the first indication, because the engine started to run a little rough. And there was nothing you could do in the carburetor to get that roughness out. So I knew that we had broken the bottom of a piston skirt. Now as time went on, let me see. Can you see how we've actually burned out the side of that piston right there? That's gone. That's done from too advanced the timing. That's that engine ping that you ever hear everybody referring to. Oh, my car knocks, or I have a ping, or so on and so forth. If you've got excessive timing or a poor fuel, and you've got that little engine knock, that's what it will do to the piston. This case, it burnt out the side. I've also seen it burn a hole right through the top. That's that ping that they're referring to. The new cars have got a computer on them which will actually retard the timing. That's why you hear them say that, oh, you don't hear the ping, you just lose power. And that's the reason why. They have to control that timing so you don't burn a piston out. Now, let me start off with compression. These two pistons here, you can see how this has got a dish in it. It's a D-shaped like dish. This has got also a little recess in it, these two. These are of a stock type of piston. It gives you like 8-to-1 compression. By cutting out the center of this piston, it reduces the compression in the cylinder. This one and this one will run anywhere from 8.2-to-1 to an 8.5-to-1. Now you can get them higher by milling the heads, but we'll get into that when we start talking heads. I want to jump over here. This is what they call a flat top piston. This is a stock version of a flat top. See the 4 valve reliefs in it? This is an aftermarket version of a flat top. It's got what they call an eyebrow in it. It doesn't have 4 valve reliefs. It's got an eyebrow where the 2 valves come down. They actually, and there's a distance there, which we'll show you later on. Distance that is measured. Now, here's, by looking, you can visually see stock, flat top, aftermarket. Now right here, this is the eyebrow. See this eyebrow? Here's another eyebrow. It's got a little point here. That doesn't go right straight across like this other one does. This brings the compression up by probably 0.2. This is not the main thing that we bought this piston for. This piston and wrist pin assembly is actually 150 grams lighter than this fella is. This is a regular flat top piston. This is an ultra lightweight flat top piston. You can't tell by looking at them, but there's a difference in weight of 150 grams. Now we'll go over here. Can you see this little pop top? Let me turn it to the side. What it has, there, that's a little better. What it is there's, right here, there's extra material put on the top. This is going to raise the compression. No more flat top like we're looking. It's flat top over here, but over here they put a bump. This bump is actually 100 thousandths tall. So what it does is it increases the compression. This flat top is 10.5-to-1. By putting this little pop top on, it brings it up to 12.5-to-1. Very simple. The less volume in that cylinder, the more the static compression. Now the ones that we've got in the car now have got a very large pop top on it. It's actually 388 thousandths tall, and it brings my compression with the right set of heads, and we'll talk heads later, brings my compression up to 13.9 to 14.4-to-1. Now let's get into, that's why it says stock, if you're going to run every day and you want to just keep bouncing around on the street and go and get groceries, this is the one that you want to use. If you want to get a little more horsepower, here you go into a flat top, and you can see that there's different flat tops that are available, or you go into a pop top. Now that piston I showed you that was dirty, that was the one that we had run 21 runs on. I could take a little lacquer thinner because these pistons are of a special nature, and I'm going to tell you about them in 1 second. But I actually took lacquer thinner and wiped the top of this piston off, and it comes out looking brand new like this fella right here. This is the mate to it. This is number 1 cylinder. This is number 2 cylinder. Now, on these stock pistons, that's as clean as they're ever going to get. And I'm going to tell you the reason for that. This piston here is what they call, now listen very carefully, it's called a hypoeutectic piston. The stock pistons are an aluminum alloy, and they add silicone to them. The silicone has many different reasons for being put in there, but the main one I want to talk to you about now is the quantities of silicone that they put in. This hypoeutectic has 9% or less silicone. The piston that took its place is called a eutectic. Eutectic has 11 or 12% of silicone in it. The newest piston out on the market is called a hypereutectic piston. Hypereutectic is 12 or greater. These pistons have such a shine on them because they actually have 16 to 18% of silicone in these formula when they put these pistons together. So what it does is it actually reflects the heat back into the chamber, makes more horsepower, because by reflecting the heat within that process, you're going to develop more horsepower on a hypereutectic than you would on the others. Now, this hypereutectic piston, compared to a stock piston, even has a different ring location. You can see the large space between the first and the second ring, where these are the same distance. What they've done here is they've moved the upper ring higher. Now, this creates a problem because it reflects heat back into the combustion chamber and the position of this ring. This ring actually runs much hotter than a standard piston and ring combination. What you've got to do is open up the end gap. By making this a larger end gap, the piston won't even know what's happened to the ring. But you have to understand before you even get into this that there's specific things that you have to do when you're going to make horsepower. And this is one of them. We'll show you how to end gap these pistons as we go along. Now, this gap here, what it does is you actually get pressure spikes between the first and the second ring. By putting this gap here, it takes away the pressure and keeps the rings seated on the cylinder wall. So that's why that is put in there. Now what you've got is, top one is a compression ring. Second one, which we have, is a gapless ring. This top ring here, and it comes in 2 different configurations. Stock is 5/64, racing is 1/16. The reason you would use a stock ring is it seals better under 6,500 RPMs. If you're going to go over 6,500 RPMs, you want to go into the 16th inch ring. That will seal better above 6,500. Now, this second ring that we're using here is not a single ring. There's actually 2 rings put together to form what they call a gapless seal. This one here, let me get a ring here. what you've got, your top ring is a single ring, double moly or chrome, single ring right there, and this is where you would be filing for that end gap, right here. Now the second ring is actually two rings. This one here has got a groove cut in it. It actually looks like an L. After you get through file fitting this ring for clearance, this is a ductile iron ring. This second ring actually fits right into that groove, and where that gap was, this ring closes it up. That's why they call it a zero gap. There's no gap in here to allow the pressure to bypass and go down into the pan. Now what we're talking about is when you test this cylinder to see how much leakage you're getting. With a standard set of rings, which do not have the gapless effect, you're going to get between an 8 to 10% leak down test. With a zero gap ring, you're going to get 2% maximum. What you're doing is you're not allowing the hot gases to pass by the ring and go into the oil pan. Very critical. Will definitely make you more horsepower. The last ring we're going to talk about is your oil ring. With the particular piston that we run, we have to run a heavy oil ring. They come in pressures, a 9-pound and 11-pound pressured spring. It's actually 3 pieces of steel put together. You've got the center, and then you've got the 2 end rails which go in there, and you'll see these up close as we're file fitting them. But the reason for it is we have a pin, which I'm going to show you here. The bottom of this piston has got metal here. The bottom of this piston does not have metal here. So consequently, they've pinned this so this bottom rail will not slide and come down into here. And I'll give you some up close on these as we get to file fitting the rings and going that way. Here's that wrist pin assembly. I don't know if my hands are a little slippery to get it out. But this wrist pin here weighs 150 grams. The one that we have in the other pistons only weigh 100 grams. Now we're going to end the segment here. We're going to start to get ready to put the crank rods and pistons in the motor. So stay tuned for next week. And don't forget my motto, do drags, not drugs, and I'll see you at the racetrack.